Good evening, everyone. We're so happy you can join us tonight. We really hope that you enjoyed Sugar Daddy. It was our first selection for International Women's Day from Vancouver director Wendy Morgan and the extremely talented Vancouver-born writer-actress Kelly McCormack as well, who's joining us for the Q&A. I hope you have your caramel martinis in hand and are ready to enjoy a good chat with some of, I think, Canada's brightest stars, up and coming and brightest stars. And wasn't Rosette's music beautiful? It really was a nice come into this film, because the film is all about music and art, and that's what I love about the film. And she's from Calgary as well, so we've got a lot of West Coast representation here. So perfect selection for tonight's film, Sugar Daddy. And also the film casts a pretty serious lens, I think, on some patriarchal industries in Canada, particularly the music business. So that's something we'll talk a little bit about, but also all the different styles of music in the film as well. So we're very fortunate to have with us tonight Vancouver-born actress Kelly McCormack. Kelly is an outstanding Canadian actor and a filmmaker, writer, director, and producer. She's worked in film and TV and on stage, and she has a production company, and she is executive producer for that production company, Floyder Films. And that's named after your dog, isn't it, Kelly?
Yeah.
I think, Kelly, you're best known for your role as Seth in the sci-fi series Killjoys, but also Letterkenny, which is where I think I saw you first, except Barn Wedding, which OFFA screened quite a few years ago. And I remember you from Barn Wedding. So as soon as I saw you in the film, I said, oh, Barn Wedding. Really great. And I think you're starring in A League of Their Own too, coming up on Amazon, right?
Yeah.
Wonderful. All right. And also on board tonight is Gemini award-winning actor and veteran of the film and TV industry, Colin Fiore, also an officer of the Order of Canada. And he's also appearing in our film for next week. Colm, I didn't know if you know we're screening My Salinger Year next week. So yes, so double Colm Feore. That's just wonderful. So welcome. And also a big welcome to Lauren Guyatt. Lauren is, of course, a talented Sheridan alumni who is an assistant director on the film as well. So welcome, everybody. What a great film. We've got kudos pouring in here on the chat, but we'll start talking a little bit, then we'll get to that. So I know Wendy isn't available to join us tonight. And I just wanted to start, Kelly, with you. I know I see a lot of influences in the film to do with music. And I know that, I know Wendy was a music video producer, I think, but you are a classically trained musician. So tell us a bit about your musical influences on the film.
Yeah, I grew up starting in classical music. I started singing when I was about 7, and I was very much put on the classical music opera track, and that was very much that was kind of my pedigree and how I started, and a lot of the themes of the film and how women are sort of trained to please, and how we are how we prioritize the high voice that a woman has was something that I struggled with a lot when I was younger, because I was already sort of struggling with gender identity and whatnot. So when I was very young, I kind of went rogue and started, I moved to New York and wanted to do experimental theater and get naked on stage and drip myself in black ink and just be absolutely crazy. So I spurned the hopes and dreams of my music teacher and sort of my mom at the time. So, but yes, I came up through classical music and opera, and those influences have obviously stayed with me, but in many ways I sort of unpack how gender performs in the opera industry, how high and precious a single female voice can be, and how that is kind of challenged in the film. But and Foxtrot, who wrote the original music for the film, she also comes from classical music and played the violin growing up. And there's no instrument that's more emblematic of like that precious high female sound than the violin, singing the melody. So her and I really bonded over classical music. And then it was really important to us that Darren was not just a multi-instrumentalist, but a producer herself. So all the classical music you hear in the film, particularly that song that Maria Callas sings and I sang at the very beginning, is woven, like some of those chord progressions we use is what it's woven throughout the songs. If we were to do like a song exploder of that final track in the film, it would be a hybrid of influences and pedal steel and opera and all that stuff. So yeah, music for me has always been the bedrock of art for me and my artistic life, but it's also been the bedrock of a lot of my interest in challenging, and feminism and whatnot.
And there's so many other influences too. I see Maya Deren in your film, who's one of my favorite filmmakers. I see a lot of experimental influences, the classical music, rock, rap. There's pretty well everything in there. It's a tour de force music.
Well, you mentioned my dog Floyd, who's named after Pink Floyd, because a lot of my influences growing up were my father's records, which were Pink Floyd, Peter Frampton, and all that sort of psychedelic music of the 60s and 70s. And one of the things we talked about Marie-Hélène, the musician, and I talked about was that there's all these incredible instances of male musicians writing these big, colossal 16-minute tracks that are all instrumental. And, even as recent as, Bob Dylan releasing a 17-minute song during pandemic, it's like you have all these instances of male musicians taking up space, like literal space with a 17-minute song. So that was a huge influence for us in that final track, which is a long, big kaleidoscope. In the script, I had just written her Bohemian Rhapsody, and I just hope for the best. But the reason I mentioned Bohemian Rhapsody in the script was because it is one of those multi-genre, large, big pieces that feel like as big as the Requiem piece of Mozart. So lots of those together.
Really amazing. And Lauren, what was it like working with such a talented group? Tell us about your experience as an AD on the film.
Oh, well, for myself, especially since it was a smaller cast and crew for all of us, we were working very closely together and a very tight-knit sort of family feeling. A lot of the time, I'll be separated in an office or off in a trailer somewhere. But we sort of worked where we played, and, the buildings we'd be shooting in were also where I would set up my office, which was lovely. So I was really a big part of it. I think my office was set up in what was our holding room / change room / where we kept our gear. So it was a really nice feeling for all of us to be so intimate throughout the production. So I got to see a lot of everything happening as it happened, which isn't always the case for myself. So it was a really different experience than when I sort of am normally a little more separated from it.
Amazing. Yeah, I could feel that intimacy in the film. It really is an intimate film that you can really identify with as a woman. I found that I was constantly finding myself in the characters, and I found that really interesting. Colm, this is a really amazing role for you. You have an amazing career. A Gemini Award for playing Trudeau, 13-year veteran of Stratford, so all that stage experience. Detective Martin in Bon Cop, Bad Cop, which is one of my favorites. Thor and the Chronicles of Riddick, and Astronaut, of course, which also screened at the Oakville Film Festival. I thought I would mention that. But the list goes on and on. So you've left such an amazing impact on the industry in Canada, and you've played so many challenging roles. Tell us about playing Gordon. Was that a challenge for you? What was it like playing a sugar daddy?
Well, the challenge and the fun of it was simply to be in service of Kelly's ideas, right? Because she'd written a script that was I thought very clear about what she wanted to do. And there were certain linchpin elements that needed to be there. They weren't always popular. They weren't always, going to be nice people, but they were really important to the journey. And I'm in a place in my career where I sort of don't care how I'm seen, right? And it's more important to do work that is interesting. By that, I don't mean to be coy. What I'm trying to suggest is I'm not waiting for my big break. It came, it went, it's gone. That's it. That's all. So now the fun is to show up in service of a great idea. And I go to writers because where I come from is the theater. So Shakespeare is my guy, Moliere, Chekhov, these kinds of people, O'Neill. So when you see good writing and great characters, I cleave to that. And Kelly had all of that. And an interesting character with all kinds of layers that were never going to be revealed. In fact, are not entirely revealed in this film. I'm hoping that her next film will expand on that. But the bottom line is, when you're offered a decent part, you have to say yes. Because if you're really an actor, then what you do is act. And if you complain about how your career is going, but you ever say no, then you've no one to blame but yourself. My feeling is say yes and just keep saying yes. And with Kelly, that was really, really easy because the role he's complicated. He seems on the surface to be just another, kind of creepy old man, which obviously, required very little acting. But Kelly made it more complicated by layering in the stuff that he didn't reveal. And some of it he did a little bit later throughout the film. And I find that interesting. I find that it's a very good use of my accumulated skills, these 40 something plus years.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. And there's so many elements in this film, as I mentioned, relating back to the art world, but also to the stage, the dance, the drama, the color, everything is just beautiful about the film. And I'm wondering, for each one of you, I just wanted to find out what is your favorite scene from the film? We'll start with back to Kelly.
My favorite scene. I mean, you just mentioned like the theater, which is, my as well as is for Colm. It's where I got my start. Like, if I could make movies that were less like full of luster and color, like, Powell and Pressburger's The Red Shoes, like something meta theatrical. Anything meta theatrical for me is like just a drug. I love all that stuff. So, God, my favorite scene, it's just difficult because so much of the film is like my face that I feel. But
it's all you.
It feels like a little weird. I don't know how to really separate myself from it enough to say like this is what I like. But I will say the moment where my real life sister and I sing at the end and sing the Roaches Hammond song, I feel like the whole world stops for me. The whole film stops for me because that is my sister and we are pretending to call our mother, and getting getting the Roaches to give us that song to sing. Like, I personally emailed Suzy Roach and said, this is a movie about two sisters and a mom, and you had, your music has given us so much. And my sister and I grew up on an island in BC with my uke, like, singing this song on our boat. So for me, that on a deeply personal level is what I wanted to accomplish. And I feel very proud of that moment. But other than that, like, my favorite scene, I mean, it's too much, but that one it still gets me. Like, it's hard to watch because I feel it so deeply, that moment.
It's also kind of when your mother is seen once in the film, and then the phone rings, and you see mom, but you really don't see her again. You hear her voice, but that's kind of when you really connect with your mother, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important part of this film, is that bonding, the family bond, but mother and daughter bond. Tell me a bit about, is that a bit autobiographical for you?
If there was one way, I mean, you can't help but, I mean, this whole film, nothing you write is impersonal. Like, there's just no way to ever, I feel like I've written you know, I've written myself into every character. I mean, some of the stuff that Gordon says, I feel like some of the things that Nancy says, like I've said, like it's impossible to extricate yourself from that. But if there was a way that this film is autobiographical, it is probably, you know, that shift that I think a woman goes through at 25, where I think for me and this character, she sort of stops looking to search for paternal approval and starts looking to the maternal approval, the mother of creation, her own art, her own self, and womanhood. It's a sort of massive shift in energy. And for that, I remember when that, you know, pin or penny dropped for me when I was 25. And yes, that's certainly a thing. I mean, our musician Foxtrot and I talked about, I mean, the very first line of the song is, Mother, I just never knew we've always been the same. And this is this big aha moment. And it's not the money that she receives from Gordon that gives her the ability to make music finally. It's this reconciliation she has with her mother. And yeah, I would say I was not the best. I wasn't the best daughter to my mom until I was about 25. And then at 25, I felt like I was smacked in the face and was like, wow, I've been sort of a shit daughter. I should maybe write a film about it. And that's what I did.
What about you, Lauren?
Well, I really like the elements that were very music video-esque during this film. I started in music videos, and then of course I've done scripted for a very long time now. But when we were down by the water and you're in the car with the gentleman that passes out next to you, and you sort of go into your own space and you're outside of the car with the smoke, was very, just very touching moment, very sort of pausing and stillness of life and for the character. And then of course you're very quickly jerked out of that moment, which I just sort of found very relatable, and just very nice to film something in a music video form. We did it in a lot of the scenes, of course, but with it, you know, as opposed to scripted, you get to go a little more off the page. And I'd say there are a few scenes like that even that were scripted, but very felt a little documentary-esque, like the conversations just between the cast flowed very naturally, whether you were at the bar or the moment in your apartment where you guys are discussing prostitution and it sort of revealed there what you're doing. So moments like that were very memorable for myself, to be honest, because the one when we were in the apartment as well took a long time for us to film. It was a really nice day to sort of get in heavy into one scene. And I felt that way same with the car, because a lot of time we're so quickly hurrying up and jumping from one thing to the next, and everything, especially for my job, is so time-based and I'm always looking at the clock. So it was really nice to be able to get into these moments and stick with them. So those two, I guess, would be my two favorites.
Wonderful. What about you, Colin?
Just an addendum to what Lauren was saying. The guy in the car listening to the opera is the very brilliant Nick Campbell, who I thought was absolutely sublime, and in that, because he had a dignity and a kind of regal quality about what it is he needed and how simple his expectations were, that it was absolutely brilliant. However, that's not my favorite scene. I have a couple of favorites. One of them is one that Lauren mentioned, is the apartment scene with the gang of friends, and that kind of what I call Barney Miller acting, where you're none of you old enough to remember. There's a show on television called Barney Miller, and one of the things they did is that they overlapped each other in dialogue. It was a police cop thing, and they just talked over it. And what that scene had was what I wouldn't know because I've never been invited to one of those parties, but it was a very accurate reveal of what that life is like. And of course, the first person I sent this to was my 24-year-old daughter, and said, "Honey, watch the movie. Tell me if we're on track here." And thumbs up came back. And that was particularly one of the things that she said, it's exactly like that. That's what we do. That's how it happens. And I thought that the candor and the raw, nakedness that Kelly convinced all of her pals to come and do, which was a virtual theater around the dinner table, 12-person scene, but in a crowded, crappy little apartment where everybody just told the truth over a glass of wine. I thought that captured the spirit of the film, and it was that I wanted to be a part of, right? And I have my own favorite scenes where it's just me and Kelly sharing intimate secrets of, where we've come from. Why are we here? She cut one of my favorite lines, of course. And
Oh no!
I'm heartbroken because she asked me, why do you do this? Why do you hire young women to come and have dinner with you? And Kelly may not realize the brilliance of her writing in this, and then it's okay, authors maybe don't get this. But the answer Gordon gave was, because I can. And it was so impotent and so magnificently wrong for the moment that you knew that this relationship was only going to go so far, because he clearly was on a different page. But because he'd already revealed enough about his own history, his past lives, marriages, daughters, etc., we knew that his experience was freighted with all of that stuff. And that's really fine writing. So when you get a chance as an actor to do that stuff, they stay in your mind. I mean, I could still remember most of the lines, which is unusual.
We only cut that one line you said later because your acting was so good that you said it all in silence, that we were like, we don't need, it felt like, oh, there was a line that he says later, but yeah, the Everest line is still in there, because I can. That's still in the film.
Yeah, well.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
You say, Colm, it's important to know and assert your value when you are selling an intangible commodity. That stuck with me, because I've been thinking about that since I heard it. Every time I hear it, I think about it a bit more. So, especially as an artist, right?
It's art. How do you put a price on this? I mean, Van Gogh sold nothing while alive, and now look what's happening.
Yeah.
I mean, ridiculous. Even Winston Churchill, as long as he was owned by Angelina Jolie, is selling for millions of dollars.
Yeah.
So it is a very rarefied thing. And although Kelly would maintain that Gordon's giving her some money as a scholarship is not as important as maybe singing a Roaches song, I, of course, have a completely different view of that event, awkward as it was. I think that it is inspired patrons who support the arts and say, look, I believe in you. I will support you creating whatever it is you create. Just do your thing. Go be you. I made a lot of money in pillows and dry cleaning, but I want what you've got. And so that's the knife edge balance that I think the film dances on so beautifully. And it's what makes it so much fun, and what leaves so much gray area for our connection to it. So we're not didactic. We're not beating you on the head with something. It's not, this must be this, therefore. It's kind of like this for some people sometimes.
I definitely wanted not just female artists, but every artist to when they watch this film, understand and see themselves in how confusing and conflating the whole aspect of singing for your supper as an artist is. Like the line you mention is you're selling an intangible commodity. He's looking at wine. Like, I kind of wrote this in the script. He's looking at the wine and he's saying, like wine, you're selling this intangible commodity and all this stuff. And like sex with women and art, it's this intangible commodity, but like just simply as an artist. So when she gets this money at the end, and every artist can relate to this, is like when we are given a patron, when we are given a scholarship of sorts, the conflation of self-worth and art, and then on top of that, your sexuality or your performative gender, or how well you're being female, or how well you're being a male in this industry is disorienting. And it's honestly what I think it's one of the reasons why a lot of artists don't survive the industry, is because it's like, we need money, but we are anti-money, but you need that. And so it's a question of, what are you giving me when you give it, when you're giving it to me? What am I buying? What are you selling? All that.
It's like this tug of war between art and commerce, and the fact that, as filmmakers, we tell ourselves we need to monetize what we're working on. We need to monetize our films and our our work, because if we don't, we're just going to end up bitter. At the end of the day, we'll end up bitter with it. And I think Darren's character realizes that too. I mean, I see that very powerfully in the scene where she's going back to play the instruments, that she ends up buying her instruments back, but she's so frustrated that she has to play in a pawn shop, so that powerful scene.
It's a constant thing, I think. And I also think you don't stop struggling with it. Like, just because you start getting paid as an actor or paid as a writer or paid or whatever, you don't stop having these conversations of what am I worth, and what is, and how weird and disorienting the relationship is. It doesn't stop. It just gets weirder.
Sure. We have a question here. I don't want to forget our audience. So from Chelsea Reichert, Kelly, huge fan of yours from Letterkenny. I'm wondering how tough it is to play such drastically different roles. What type of role would you say comes more naturally to you?
Well, thank you. Thank you for supporting my work. I need it and I appreciate it. I would say at my very core, I'm a character actor. If I could have my way, I'd be in theater and pantomimes and doing weird experimental theater my whole life and playing like the weird gremlin in the background or this or whatever. Like, the litmus test I have for saying yes to a gig is how terrified I am of it and how different it is from the last thing I've done. So if I was cutting a reel a couple years ago and I was like, no, I'm not going to get any job because there's absolutely no consistency. and they're going to be like, we don't know what to hire you for because everything you do is too different from the next. But so I don't really know what character would be most natural to me myself. I mean, I find I'm a very uninteresting person. I would never want to play someone close to myself. I am an actor because I want to disappear into somebody else. So that's a tough question. I don't. Every character I've played and every character I have an interest in playing is as a part of me and is of me, but I go out of my way to make them an absolute departure and something I can have fun to jump into. So who knows? I don't know. Yeah.
I think you're such an interesting person. So
thank you.
So that's Colm, now that we're talking about this very interesting question, what type of role what's your favorite type of role? I think you kind of talked about that with Sugar Daddy, but where do you like to see yourself the most?
Employed. No, if you can put the words working and actor into a sentence, you've made it, right? That's it. I've been very, very lucky. I've had a glittering career doing all kinds of things, from the classical theater to blockbuster films to art films to TV to radio to books, you name it. And so I'm now of the opinion that what's most interesting is to show up and be useful, right? So I've got a massive amount of experience. And I mean, I say this with zero modesty because,
you do.
Well, because at a certain point, you got to know what you're selling. I'm awfully good at this, right? I really am. And because, and this is not a mystery, for about 43 years, I've worked really hard to be really good at this. Okay. So starting in the classical theater, moving to film, to television, to radio, going back to the classical theater, my foundation is always in the classics, so that my understanding of narrative, the writer's intention is the primary focus of my life, is a very good foundation for everything else. And so finally, you say, you know what? If I was in a generous mood, it's time to give the gift of me to whoever wants it, right? And so the zenith of this, and this is partly because Kelly and Wendy and everybody on this film, Lauren, was pretty much a woman, pretty much everybody.
Yes.
Even on some days, even me. It was I was juggling pronouns. I wasn't sure because It was a very wonderfully embracing, safe place to be. Now, I'm married to a director. She's extraordinary, but I know how hard all this is. I know all that. And I know what my function is. And I suppose the end of my journey is that I understand my limitations, right? I'm good at a couple of different things. And if I can use those things in service of somebody like Kelly's ideas, then it's a great day, and it's a good life, and it's a great career. And so for me, I mean, I remember my first meeting with Kelly, where we sat down and I thought, okay, I hope this audition goes well. I don't know, there's a lot of unemployed old guys here in Toronto who would be happy to do this. And I'm going to pitch myself with, and I did. I pitched myself very enthusiastically, like I have a lot of experience, got all this, maybe that could be of use to you. And, but that's the job now, right? So I just feel very grateful and very blessed to be able to keep doing it.
Wonderful. You brought up something that I did want to talk about, and that is the fact that this is pretty much all woman cast and crew, right? So was it did that help with the intimacy, with working together with other women? Tell us about that experience for both Lauren and Kelly and Colm.
Yeah, I mean, women are my muse. They are my religion. They are what keep me up at night. They are what, their livelihood and betterment, and the betterment of their livelihood is what makes my blood boil, and the things that make me want to tear down, fight, just think of all the visceral, violent imagery. That's how I feel about the plight of women and the struggle of the 10,000 years of patriarchy and all that. So I wrote this film in a really lonely, dark place, and then I got to the point where I was like, okay, I gotta do something with it. So I found a producer, and I was looking for a producer, and Lauren Guyatt, I had heard a lot of people had told me to work with her, and so I had sent it to her, and she was like, no, I just had a baby. And then it got to Lori Lazinski, and then Lori Lazinski and Lauren had planned to want to make a film together, and so she convinced Lauren. They both said yes, and so it was the three of us. In terms of I know there are some films who have gone out to be like, okay, we're only going to have women, we're only going to hire women. I don't know if that was a conscious conversation or a decision we made in the beginning. It just became the material, and I'm a very, Colin mentions our first meeting. Our first meeting, we bro down on Stephen Sondheim pretty much immediately. But Stephen Sondheim is like my church, and he says this constant adage of content dictates form, and the content of this film had to dictate the form in which we try to tell it. And it just became apparent that we needed women, we needed their perspective, and we interviewed men as well, and it became, how does a woman frame this film? How does a woman edit this film? And some of the things we were screaming about, that we were trying to put words to, that were unspeakable or grotesque or atrocious, some of these feelings, it's like you just have a shorthand with women because they understand it. They understand what it feels like for empowerment to be spitting ink as opposed to wearing a power suit. It's like they know what feeling like you have to shed your skin and resurrect yourself as a 25-year-old woman looks like and feels like. So when I had said things like, I don't know, what if I'm in my room in plastic, like a plastic dress to represent all the female silhouettes I need to be in, and I'm naked, and then I spit ink and I make this camcorder, I have a bunch of women just nodding, being like, yep, that seems like that makes sense. So it was conscious and unconscious, and yes, and without even, it goes without saying that it creates an intimate environment. You reduce the level of friction and the level of walking on eggshells and dealing with ego when you increase the amount of women who are on set. It's pretty much math. The sets that I've worked on as an actor, that I've been privileged enough to work as an actor, where there is women in positions of power or above the line positions, they're just better sets. There seems to be something women are good at, and arranging and micromanaging and functioning a giant moving target seems to be one of them, which, is no surprise. So I'll let Lauren, obviously jump in on this because.
No, absolutely. I do agree. We are very good at the schedules behind me sort of show that, we're good at all that multitasking, and just sort of, it does create a very different environment for sure. The over 10 years that I've been doing this, I have definitely seen a change in the positions. I definitely was working with a lot more men when I first started, and I've seen definitely a lot more first assistant directors and second assistant directors I've worked with, along with directors, producers. So it definitely felt, this film in particular, I felt a big connection when I walked in and met Lauren and Lori and introduced myself as Lauren. So already it was this tight knit little name game, and it was just sort of a really nice feeling. And, there was of course still a large amount of men on the crew. But I think what you're saying too, when it's women that are above the line, sort of in those positions of directors and producers that are really sort of bringing it all together, they set a certain tone. And it was definitely there throughout. And in the intimate settings that we were in, it was very nice to have that. So that's sort of what I was saying before, that very much a family feeling was there, and every day felt not like coming into a job with that, and felt very safe and felt like a place where you could voice your opinion and that you could really just feel comfortable.
It's also an enormously useful education for men. Lauren talks about all these crew guys. Crew guys tend to be pretty rough and ready, heavy lifters, and it's not an easy job. Lots of girls can do it, no question. But it's tough, and it's sassy, and there's heavy lifting involved. But as both Lauren and Kelly suggested, when it's led with a feminine sensibility, it's just, in my experience, more nurturing, more caring, more supportive, more understanding, more I have our best interests at heart, as opposed to, you need to tell me I'm the boss all the time, right? And that's an enormously creative environment, because you just think, I feel really safe here. So if she asks me to do something really dangerous and awful and awkward, and I'm probably going to say yes. And so I think it's a massive education, and obviously it's baby steps. This is early stages, but I have to say, on the show I'm working on right now, Umbrella Academy, the place is pullulating with women in all kinds of positions of power. Our first ADs, our directors, producers. So I'm really encouraged that films like this will give a vocabulary so that we can articulate amongst ourselves what's missing, what's been missing, where we got it wrong, and how we might get it right.
And I think also to that point, Colm, is that you feel very comfortable to say yes, but you also feel in a good environment to say no when you don't feel comfortable. There's not that pressure.
Yeah, well, the traditions of cinema is the traditions of the military, like even the language that you yell, you're yelling at this like vulnerable person, action, like it's run like a military, and with the masculine imperative. And listen, there's incredible things that come from the masculine imperative, and in the fact that you're doing this insane thing, and you're waking up at insane hours, and it's like go go go. But if the feminine imperative isn't working alongside that, then you miss all the sensitivity. And this film was super intimate, and like I was naked for like half of it, and like it's just like I'm
not the half of it that I was in.
No, there were times where I was just on set in a blanket or half naked, and like forgetting that I'm talking to crew members like this, and I'm also a producer on the film, so I'm giving instructions or whatever, but like I'm at a point where I can be totally comfortable being in that vulnerable space. And that's creating the feminine imperative, is knowing when, our first AD was a male, and like he understood and was there, and like could manage that sort of situation. And otherwise, the work that I shot with Colin, we shot it over the course of 3 days. Like our last day of shooting was all that stuff in his house, the kitchen, the conversations we couldn't have done, and all the intimate scenes between us, and like me singing to him, and all that stuff that we found, that was done in 1 day.
1 day.
We would not have been able to do that if there was any inkling of uncomfortableness. Like if there was any, like that was because we created a habitat, and it was like, just, you know, just find it. It's crazy to think that we only shot that whole thing in one day.
We had a question. How many days did it take to shoot the whole film?
I don't even want to mention. We shot this film in 18 days.
Amazing.
It's amazing. Is it amazing? It's amazing. No, it's great. It's amazing. It's just, I'm all about, we need, you know, time is money, money is time. And we have to give Canadian filmmakers more time to make films. We have to give them more money and more time, because the things we were rushed on, you know, at times that we had to rush ourselves on, it's like, you know, it's just hard. Like the system for making Canadian films is difficult. We don't have enough resources.
Yeah, we all know that for sure.
18 days.
18 days. Amazing. Really amazing. Well, we've got some amazing comments you can read. Really appreciate the authenticity, intimacy, such a rich conversation. Colm, huge fan of yours. Great to see you in this film. Powerful scene, talking about the your birthday party scene, which is a great scene as well. So I think this film is really an ode to women, to the resourcefulness, to the creative drive, and to the you know, that learning process that you went through, Kelly, your character, learning about life. And because clearly the music business, you were thinking that Nancy, for example, well, because she's a woman, she can't be in charge. So, you know, even women are learning and growing, and that's just wonderful. And that's what International Women's Day is all about. That we're celebrating who we are and where we are, and what women have accomplished. And I think the industry is becoming, women are doing so much better in the industry. I'm still seeing some of the statistics which are getting better. It's taking some time, but it is getting better, and I'm very optimistic for the future. So thank you very much, Kelly and Colm and Lauren. This is a wonderful Q&A. We really appreciate your taking the time to join us and celebrate International Women's Day with us. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Catherine Balinga, for your delicious cocktails. And thank you, Jen, for your beautiful song. And thank you, our audience, for being with us tonight. Have a lovely evening, everybody.
Thank you all. Thanks for having us.